click yes. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. This is making the most of your congressional meetings, strategies for effective advocacy. You can say strategies for effective advocacy or education. We recognize that many of you have been doing this for a very long time. You have done Hill visits, perhaps many times. Really, this is coming from a need of how the landscape is shifting really rapidly, how our interactions with the Hill are changing in this current environment. And also, both Liz, Shoshana, and I have all worked on the Hill in different capacities. And before I came to AUCD, I was on the opposite side of the table during constituent meetings. And so we've seen constituent meetings that are run really well and constituent meetings that maybe weren't. And so really pulling from that bench of knowledge of what makes a meeting really good and helpful to staff. And then we've been on the Hill a lot in the last couple of months and have kind of finessed a script or a routine that really works for us and we think is effective. And so we wanted to just kind of share some of those touch points and the learning that we've been doing with the network to support you all in those same efforts. Overall goal being improving effectiveness in Hill and in district meetings, and that's something that all of us can continue to improve on over time. And I would say that every meeting I take, I do a little bit better every single time and find something that I like saying differently. Obviously, advocacy and education is incredibly important to AUCD and our network's priorities for a number of reasons. I think the main one that I would highlight, and I've said this before, is that as your national organization, we obviously go and advocate for our network and your network, but it really is a partnership, and offices want to hear from constituents and they want relationships with constituents and the folks in their state. And so we don't want to just advocate for the network, but with the network. And so this is about continuing to bridge that gap and work alongside you all in developing strong Hill relationships over time. What we're going to cover today, we'll start by talking about understanding your audience. We're going to talk about preparing for success and the pre-work that goes into a successful Hill meeting, conducting the meeting itself, and then follow up. And we will have time for questions at the end as well. We'll start with understanding your audience. When you either go on a Hill visit or maybe you're doing a visit in district, which would mean either in your state, just in your state, if we're talking about your senators, or the district itself, which would be your member of Congress in the congressional district. You may have the opportunity to meet with the member themselves, but you may just be meeting with staff. I've spoken to folks before who, when they realize that they're taking a meeting with staff, they feel a little disappointed because the member is the member and they are powerful and it's the member. But at the same time, staff meetings are actually really, really important and a great meeting to have. Staff is often who is actually shaping the policy priorities at that nitty-gritty level on behalf of the member. Those policy priorities fall in line with the overall interests and issues that the member works on and the pieces of legislation that they choose to take up and champion. But it really is the staff that have the time and the capacity to develop deep policy knowledge on a topic and get to know individual programs. And so staff can often in an office be your best advocate up to a member. So while it's wonderful to get a meeting with a member, staff is great too. I'm not going to go into detail on this, but we will share these slides out as well. This is a really great link that gives definitions of different congressional staff roles. The titles can be really confusing. What's the difference between a legislative correspondent and a legislative aide? And what does that mean? Who am I meeting with? So if you end up with a meeting, this is a really great resource to go look at and check what is the title of the person I'm talking to, and what does that mean for where they fall within the office. There's also the difference between your kind of the next point, the staff that typically work in district as opposed to the staff that work on the Hill. In district, staff tend to be less policy focused, and they're more constituent facing, meaning the relationship maintenance. You will often see caseworkers, that type of thing. Whereas the Hill staff, that's where you're going to see more of the policy folks. So if your meeting that you're taking is in district compared to you're in DC for a conference and you decide to schedule a meeting with your member's office while you're here, how you focus that meeting may be a little bit different based on who you're talking to within the office itself and where they are oriented to. And then it's always helpful to, when you are going into meetings, think about the current political context and what's going on. Whether that is talking about partisanship, whether it's thinking about your particular member and what are their committee assignments. And they may not be on any committees that are of relevant jurisdiction to our issues. But that doesn't mean they're not worth meeting with. It just impacts how you prepare for your meeting and how you're going to talk about your ask or your work in general. And then it's also really important to think about the members' personal interests and what their ties to the disability community might be. And the general political context is also understanding. So I'm trying to think of a solid example. So as we were talking and doing Hill meetings in this last month, a lot of how we had to be careful about what we were talking about was also recognizing that members were actively engaged in reconciliation at the same time. So framing our things around the current landscape of other controversial votes that were happening and other asks that disability groups were making, and how we either combine those things or intentionally step aside from them for the particular context of a meeting, any of that. It's just good to know the landscape of what's going on and how that relates to your member. So preparing for success. The first and most important thing you would need to do is a lot of research. And maybe it's not a lot of research, but setting aside 30 minutes to say, I'm going to do some context gathering. You would want to research the member themselves. What are their priorities in your state? What are their priorities nationally? And what are the types of things that they tend to talk about? When do they engage with press? They're probably engaging with press on things that are important to them. So if you see a common theme of things that they're repeatedly bringing up in the press, that would tell you it's something that's important to them. You could look at their website and look at recent statements and see what is their office issuing a statement about. And I go back to connections to disability. Are they a parent? Do they have a sibling? What work have they done on disability in the past? Do they have any bills that they have led on? Do they have any bills that they have joined onto and are a sponsor to? That's all really helpful to know. I would say equally as important is if you know the staffer, if you know the name of the staffer you're meeting with, research the staffer you are meeting with. This is as simple as doing a quick look on LinkedIn at who they are and what their background is. This is really important for when you begin your meeting, and we'll kind of go into what a mock agenda might look like, knowing how much context you do or don't have to give a person. An example for me was while working on HELP, I had some constituent meetings where folks spent 6 to 7 minutes of the 30-minute window describing to me what competitive integrated employment is. They hadn't looked at my background and didn't realize that I worked in state employment for people with disabilities, and I was very familiar with what CIE is. And so it was not a good and effective use of their time, and they could have saved 6 or 7 minutes to talk about something else that was more important if they had done the context gathering and looked at who was on the invite to know who am I talking to and what's their background. It also informs you of, is this person meeting with me, but they come from an ed lens? Because most offices don't have a dedicated disability staffer. So sometimes the UCED might be under the purview of an ed staffer. And that means that person might be thinking about your issues differently than if in a different office, the UCED or LEND is under the purview of the health staffer. So having just that general context, who am I talking to? What's their background? Is really going to set you up for a more effective meeting and from the start. Knowing going in, why am I meeting with this office? What's the purpose? Um, I know that the ask piece isn't quite possible for a lot of you all, so it may not be an ask in that direct sense. Are you meeting to thank the member for work that they've been doing and for supporting your center directly, or a piece of legislation that you all think is valuable? Is this just a regular once a year touch point where you are informing the office of, hey, here's our annual report, here's some of the stuff we've been doing, here's this new partnership we've got in the state? Or is there a particular thing like right now that you are concerned about? And so you don't have an ask, but you have a particular concern and you are meeting with the office to share a concern in the current landscape. And knowing going in what that purpose is and having that orientation is important, and making sure everyone on the team that is meeting with the office, including if you have any advocates, if you have family members, if you have trainees, making sure everyone knows and is on the same page of why are we here, is really important. Obviously, or maybe not obviously, I suppose, but a lot of what makes a meeting really effective is by crafting a compelling story from start to finish and providing good context for what is the work you are doing, why is it important, how does it touch the lives of people with disabilities, and packaging that nicely and in a accessible way for a staffer who may not know anything about your center and maybe has never heard of you before. So that storytelling element makes a good meeting. You would want to have prepared and bring with you good, concise materials. So one-pagers, data from your state, data from your center, personal stories, any of those things. I would generally say the briefer, the tighter it is, the better. If you think about every constituent meeting they take, they leave with some kind of handout. So you want to craft something that they want to actually keep at their desk and pull back out from time to time. So what kinds of data might you put on there that they're not going to just shove in a drawer and never see again, but is going to be an ongoing resource for them? And then I think too, if you are going in a larger group or any kind of group at all, kind of having some designated roles within the group and knowing who's going to talk about what part of our agenda, who's going to open with this piece, and then we're going to talk about our center's work specifically, who's going to lead on that, so that everyone has a part. You keep it organized, you keep it tight, and there's kind of a good rhythm for the entire meeting. I'm going to pause here, Denise or Shoshana, because we're gonna pivot into the meeting itself. So what if anything do either of you have to add about the lead up for a meeting?
I want to add, this is Denise. I just want to emphasize a couple of things Lily said. One is you plan your meeting. You don't have to tell them everything. You don't have to tell them every project your center works on. You don't have to tell them, you don't have to have each person in the meeting tell a big long story. All of that has to do with both planning your agenda for how you're going to go through the meeting and the research on the member. The other thing I was thinking about, Lily, as you were talking, if there is something that your member is really interested in, this member is on the committee and heads up a committee looking at apprenticeships, then guess what? If you're doing something at apprenticeships, you want to talk about that. all of that research makes a huge difference. Otherwise, and you guys have been in meetings like this where everybody just sits there, where the staffer just sits there and kind of stares at you, and it just kind of goes in one ear and out the other, and they're being polite, and that's great, but they're not really taking it on and getting excited and interacting with you. You have much more chance of getting them to interact with you if you've done the research and figure out what they're interested in, either the staffer or the member. um, I've had meetings where I've gone in and with a very junior staffer, and in this particular case, it was an IPSI meeting with Vanderbilt that I'm thinking about. We were meeting with a very junior staffer, and we had a couple of the students from the Inclusive College Program at Vanderbilt with us. And the staffer got really excited because she went to Vanderbilt. And so there was a whole connection there. And I've had that happen a lot in meetings with members from the South, frankly, where people, I've had it happen in Alabama. I've had just even the person sitting at the front desk is like, oh my gosh, I went to school there and I know your mother and I know your friend and whatever. Um, the point is, the more research you've done beforehand, the more likely you are to hit on one of those. In which case, somebody for Easter seals one year, I did a visit where the minute we said Easter seals, the staffer said, "Oh, I was a counselor at camp, whatever it was." Again, and we had her from the beginning. We absolutely had her from the beginning. She heard everything. She was with us, and it was in an office that you wouldn't necessarily assume would be with you. So researching before every visit. And it's one of those things I think people, and I'll speak for myself, if you've been doing this a really long time, you don't always do all the stuff, all the planning stuff beforehand, because you just think, I've done this before. I'm going to go in. I know my things. I know what I'm going to say. It's going to be great. Or it's not. But putting in a little bit of time researching each meeting really does make a difference. So that would be the only other thing I'd add, Lily.
Oh, that's great. And I think there's a degree of flexibility too, of you may do all of that research and think that you're meeting with staffer Denise Roselle, and then you show up and Denise isn't there, and you're going to get some rando and they were not on the invite and you don't know who they are, and you do the best that you can, and that's okay. But you try to control as much of this as you can and do the prep where you're able to. Um, so that was all helpful, Denise. You're muted if
I
you're
just
adding
realized
something.
that. Amy just added a really good note in the chat. And that's if you have a federal government relations person for your university, whoever it is that you're relating to in that way, they are a valuable resource. For knowing the member, the staff, make those connections with, and again, particularly the university, they're going to know, but on other things too. Amy, that's a great point, and you're right. Those people they're incredibly valuable to know a little bit more about who you're meeting with, and they may have met with them before, and so can say to you, as they probably have, and can say to you, well, here's something she's going to be really interested in. So that's a fabulous point.
And thank you for boosting things in the chat. I cannot see it on my screens at the moment. And I think also the other note I would just make here is, especially staff side and especially house in particular, staff turns over very, very quickly. So if you have not met with an office in a year and a half, there's a very good chance on the house side that that staffer is not there anymore. You are considered seasoned if you've been in an office for a year. So to build long-term relationships means doing this on a regular cadence over and over and over again because of that staff turnover specifically. And your federal relations team is a really great way to keep tabs on who it is and what the relationships are. Click. There we go. Okay. These are some general tips for conducting a meeting, and then we'll kind of go through what our spiel is and how we've structured our meetings. It seems to work pretty well. You open with introductions, express appreciation for anything you can, whether it's a recent vote or something that they're leading or a letter they did. Find something to just say, we saw this from your boss. Thank you so much. It means a lot. This is great. As a disabled person, it was great to see this. Or as a sibling or whatever it is, just finding something to do that, and connecting on a shared priority. To Denise's earlier point too, the staff probably knows across the board what the member works on in other portfolios, but there's really wide portfolios, so it's never bad to say, if you were going to try to use that apprenticeship connection, for example, saying, oh, we know that apprenticeship is a high priority to Senator Roselle, and so we're really excited to talk to you today and share more about this new pilot program that we're working on, and da 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 da. And it creates a mental flag for the staffer of, ooh, there's something in here that my boss will be interested in. You would hope they would do the connecting of the dots themselves, but it does not hurt to do that little bit of hand holding and draw the line directly for them. Um, Doing a good job of blending facts with personal stories really helps. This is why, if you're bringing a team, bringing in people who can speak with lived experience about the work, whether that's trainees or staff or whoever it is a really impactful thing to do, while also keeping kind of tight boundaries and keeping things short and tight so that you don't go off on a long tangent and lose time for some of the important content. Where you have asks, making things clear, specific, or actionable. I go back to, I know that right now asks are a tricky thing, so you may not be able to say, please vote for the Senate's bill, but you can say, we are really happy with the language from the Senate and how it protects disability and aging programs. And we are concerned about what funding might look like in a different scenario or whatever. So you can kind of finesse that if you're in a situation that you can't make a formal ask, but making your position on whatever it is very clear to them is important. Read the room for time management. If they give you a 30-minute meeting, they need to go at 30 minutes. So keep an eye on a clock, have a watch on, whatever it is. It's really appreciated if you notice that we're winding down time. And if your meeting was 3 to 3:30 and it's 3:28, you say, hey, I recognize that we have only a couple of minutes left. Did you have any questions for us? How can we be supportive of your office's work? And just give an acknowledgement and keep things on time to be respectful of staff. That's really appreciated by them, and by members as well.
Hey, Lily,
Um,
can I jump in
mhm.
for 1 second? The only thing I would also say is that reading the room also includes if they told you you have a 30-minute window, at 15 minutes, seeing that everybody's fidgeting and the chief of staff is standing in the doorway waiting to pull the member out, or whatever it may be, that you also read the room in that way and say, look, I just want to double check. I know that we were scheduled for 30, but I also see someone standing behind you. Are we still okay?
Yes.
And again, they will really appreciate that from you. If you need to do a 2 minute, I mean, a 2 sentence conclusion, you can do it and hand them materials and check back. But just reading the room goes both ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And the pivoting if needed goes for too. If they it's frustrating when it happens, but if there's a sudden need to reschedule, or we had a meeting where all of a sudden the conference room that they had booked for us wasn't available, and they said, can we take this in the hallway? And we said, yep, we will stand in the hallway for our 30-minute meeting. And it is frustrating, but displaying grace and flexibility goes a very long way in maintaining that relationship with an office, and showing that you are a good trusted partner for them to work with.
You can also
Um,
ask them, I mean, if it's a member and the member has to go, you can also ask them, would it be okay if I walk with you? Or
mhm,
and they'll say no, or they won't. It'll be fine either way.
mhm.
But if you're not done, you got 5 minutes and you were supposed to have 30, you wouldn't have been supposed to have 30 with the member, but you get the point. Can I walk with you? And as Lily said, I stood in a window and had a meeting one day. I mean, literally 30 minutes standing in a window. But I got my meeting. So being incredibly flexible. is will go a long ways.
Yes. Also is in talking about building rapport is really important. But you do not want that conversation about, wow, we both went to the University of Missouri, isn't that cool? You don't want that to take 10 minutes of your time if you've got 30 minutes. So you want to both build rapport, but do it in a way that does not detract from the amount of time that you need to cover your material. And isn't an awkward cutoff of like, all right, now to business, but keep an eye on the clock and build relationships without losing the ability to get to the meat or the substance of the meeting. And then in a strong closing, it's having that ask, it's saying, how can we be a resource? This is some of the data, these are types of data that we collect, and here's my leave behind, here's my contact. We would love to follow up with you in 6 months and check in again and just update you on things we're working on, so that they keep you in mind. I'm going to move to our next slide, which has kind of more of the flow. This is how we've been running our meetings. So when AUCD has been going in for a meeting in a Senate office or a House office, we do really specific research on who the centers and programs are in that state. We comb your websites. We look at what projects, initiatives, set programs you are running, and we pick things from it and kind of cross-reference what we see you all doing with an office and the member to prepare for a meeting. And that was all of the pre-work. So then we get to the meeting and we introduce ourselves and say a little bit about what each one of us does. And we explain who AUCD is as a national organization. And we have these 3 member types. We've got a lot of alphabet soup. So here is the acronym on our leave behind, so you don't have to scribble it too fast. We provide a quick overview of, I think this is really important for running the meeting in a way that is logical and grounds things for staff. We start by talking about what is a UCED, what is a LEND, where are they authorized, where do they come from, and doing that table setting is, I think, a really, really important place to start. And that is how I would recommend doing it, because it contextualizes for a staffer that is looking at national programs. And yes, they care about the state, but it contextualizes for them in the policy space. What is it I'm hearing from? Because they may not know, maybe they don't know your specific institute name, or maybe they do, but the piece that you're doing is connecting your name to the statutory authority and what a UCED is and what that means. So starting there is that is what we would really heavily recommend has worked. And then we pivot from this is the national network. We pivot to our relationship within the DD Act, and you may know your protection advocacy agency. You probably know your DD council. We name them for whatever your state is. We say, you know, Disability Rights New York. We are DD Act partners with them. And then we pivot to, we're here today to talk to you about our concerns for FY26 funding. Or we're here to talk to you about the Transformation of Competitive Integrated Employment Act. Whatever the reason is for your meeting, that is kind of the point that you shift from here's who we are in the grand scheme of things to why are we here talking to you in this moment. After that, we localize it. We switch to, and actually, I'm going to back up for 1 second. I'm sorry. I should have said, when you do the overview of UCEDs and LENDs, that's a great spot to do are you familiar with UCEDs, LEND programs, IDDRCs? Have you heard of these before? If they say yes, you save yourself 3 minutes and you don't need to go into it. If they say no, then you know to start that spiel. So asking first, actually, I should have said that. I apologize. So when you're localizing it, say, now there's 68 UCEDs, 1 in every state and territory. I mentioned that before. In our state, the UCED is blank, the LEND is Y, and the IDDRC is Z. And then from naming them, and you have your materials, I provided you with some information about all of them. We do lots of different things. I want to touch on a couple that I think would really interest your office. Um, this is where Denise said before, keep it really tight. Pick 3 to 5 project or initiatives or program examples that will align with the office's interests and priorities. You can name how many you have total, but be really selective with what it is you're naming, and do a finite number of them, because otherwise their attention kind of starts to wander and it's too much to internalize and remember. I would pick 3 to 5 project examples, and then you could kind of build on that and maybe add a few examples of how you partner with your state, maybe things that you do working collaboratively with your other DD Act partners or with the with state agencies or whatever it is. So in that example space, the gist is just don't go on the full laundry list. Be really selective about which things you choose to highlight, and then you can leave a leave behind that has more information on it. But for the purposes of the meeting, don't do an exhaustive list. Um, Connecting your ask or purpose to the examples that you just gave and the work that you do is again that hand holding, kind of connecting the dots. But the concern about losing this core funding, the core funding does this for us. And these are the things that would be at risk if we don't have that core funding. Or if you were wanting to talk about Department of Ed grants, IES grants, or any other funding streams that you have, connecting why I'm here to how that actually impacts folks on the ground, our ability to administer programs, services, anything like that. And check for questions, open the door for future touch points, say thank you. Offices, it's not uncommon for them to say, hey, I was really interested in that apprenticeship program that you mentioned. Could you send me more information about that? So you want to be prepared to say, yes, of course. If they ask you a question and you don't know the answer on the spot, that is so okay. And what you do is just say, that's a great question. Thank you so much. I'm going to pull some information on that and I will get back to you very shortly. And then you do it. But it's perfectly fine if they're asking for a data point or an amount of money or anything else. It is okay to say you don't know and that you're going to go get the answer for them. The next slide, and then I'll pause again, is a couple key points that we have been bringing up in our meetings is when we talk about the DD Act or about LEND programs and CARES, we really emphasize the history of bipartisanship and how supported these programs and centers have been on both sides of the aisle. And that's something that we're very appreciative of. We always bring that up. Lately, we've been really addressing how we've been talking about how you all address state needs. The reason we've been doing that is because of the block grant rhetoric, and that block grants theoretically are people like them in theory because they are supposed to better meet state needs because states can decide how to allocate funds in a way that works for them. So as we've been talking about the issues with the block grant proposal, the way we frame that is saying, look, they're already addressing state needs. We give examples of how you all do extremely different work across the country, and that is because you address state needs. The centers in Iowa do tremendously different work from the centers in Florida, and that's a strength and it's by design. And so you're already meeting that goal. We don't need to change the funding in order to meet that goal. So that's just been a really salient point that we've worked with. And I think too is the how you all fit within the larger state ecosystem. and that eliminating USEDs or losing funding to lend programs or loss of NIH grants, how that would disrupt other entities in the state because of the data that you provide. Maybe it's the training you do, partnerships you have. We frame you as being really boots on the ground, roots in community, but also a bridge from community to other state entities in the work that you do. And that's something that tends to land pretty well. A note here is that you want to be aware of touchy subjects and frame your work using language and covering topics that will resonate most with the office. A specific example I would use is that our jargon doesn't mean the same thing in every single space. A really easy low-hanging fruit example of that is that we know when we're talking about disability and maybe we're talking about youth transition, we all know what I mean by youth transition, and we're talking about education, we're talking about employment. But if I'm sitting in an office and I start saying that one of my USEDs does a lot of work in youth transition, that might mean something very, very different to a health staffer. And you don't want to have them start going down a mental road that is not what you meant. So an easy way to do this is staying away from jargon so that things aren't misunderstood. Liz would tell you, and Liz is right, that plain language is always better. So as plain of language as you can use to describe your work is better for avoiding accidentally saying something that is misunderstood or misconstrued in the context of a specific office or specific political environments. I'm going to pause here. Denise and Shoshana, what did I miss?
I'm just going to jump and again, I think you guys know this, but I'm going to re-emphasize what Lily just said. And things that are touchy right now, the things that are touchy right now, there are more of them. Let me say it that way. I think there are more things that are touchy right now than there have been in the past. And so being really cautious, and you may not know what those things are. For some things, it's going to be pretty obvious. You're not going to go in and start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in an office of someone who's from the Freedom Caucus. You're just not. Some aren't going to be quite that obvious. But again, avoiding both the acronyms and then explaining. So if you're saying youth transition, which means in our
Yep.
field, this employment, things that happened after, etc. These ages or transition age youth, which in our field means this. I mean, inclusion, in some ways, you can't avoid using inclusion at times, but maybe you say that and then say, which in our world means this specifically. I know it seems, on one level, it seems unnecessary, but the way I think about it is that as long as I'm getting the message across, that is what the purpose of what I'm doing and why I'm there. I am there to get the message across in a way that whoever it is I'm meeting with can hear it. And so if that's the case, I want to make sure I'm using language that does not, as Lily said, language that doesn't send somebody off on a tangent and then I have to pull them back. So it's just, it is different up there now than it would have been 20 years ago in terms of how many things are touchy. So again, that goes all the way back to the research again. Knowing a little bit about the people you're meeting with will help you know what some of those things are too.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, which is that that's also where the research you do ahead of time really helps because if you know that you're meeting with this ed staffer who is a former educator, then you absolutely can use acronyms about IDEA and how your work supports data collection on this particular thing. They're probably going to know those acronyms, and so you can level set and have a very different conversation with that staffer than someone who doesn't have that background, and then you do need to slow down and use more plain language, explain terms of art. If you have to talk in terms of art, explain what you're talking about, spell out the acronyms, anything like that. And that pre-work lends well to knowing how you need to orient yourself.
Okay.
Okay. For follow-up, you want to make sure you send a thank you email within 24 hours, tell the staffer, or you're not going to tell the member directly because you don't have their email, but the staffer who connected you with the member, how much you appreciated their time. If they asked you for any information, if you can't get them the information within 24 hours, still send the thank you and say, I'm working on this. I will get it to you as soon as possible, and just acknowledge that you know there's a due out. But you don't need to wait to send the thank you until you're able to pull together whatever they've asked for. It's really helpful here. If you did not connect AUCD staff in before you did the meeting, do it at this point. There are some offices that will not necessarily take meetings as quickly with a national organization as they will with their state folks. So making sure that we are connected in, doing a quick introduction, is really helpful to give us an open door to be able to follow up with them, for us to send materials going forward, for us to set up meetings going forward. It's really preferred that we get looped beforehand. We're also always happy to attend meetings with you if it's on Zoom, if you're going in person. It's our job. I like to think we're decent at it. So happy to support and go with. But at the very least, connecting us in after the fact, I would say is about the bare minimum, is getting us making sure that we know you had the meeting, and we know who your point of contact was so that we can support ongoing efforts. In that thank you, you can also recap key points and next steps. I really enjoyed our conversation about X, Y, and Z, and appreciate the senator's support in ongoing appropriations work. Like I said, providing requested materials as promptly as you can. Recognize you all have other jobs and you're doing a lot of other things, so you may not be able to get something within 24 hours. That's okay, but don't let it fall by the wayside. If they ask you for something, you want to get it to them when you can. And then this one's a really important one, and it's that these relationships are long-term, and you can come to them just during advocacy season. But if you want to have a relationship that a member or an office goes out on a limb for you, then it's about having a relationship with them, where you're touching base with them, not just when there's an ask. So you may be thinking, then I don't know what the point of that meeting is. We took meetings where there were groups that we met with routinely twice a year. We knew that we were going to touch base with them, and they would bring updated data on the number of participants in different programs or things they were doing, how things were going in the state, what did the next 6 months, what were they planning for, what were they working on, were they having any issues, how were things going. A 6-month cadence is pretty decent. That's not a bad thing to do if you're not doing that already. It's kind of a good pace to set. It sets you up to do this in the spring, as we go into approps, and then you do a check-in again in the fall. And it builds a relationship where the office knows that if they're looking for data on a particular issue, they know that they can come to you, or if they're looking for TA on something, they know that you are a resource and have you top of mind. This is also important because, like I mentioned, there's that really high turnover. So if you have a strong relationship with an office because you've built it, and you have these regular touch points, if a staffer leaves, or when they leave, they'll typically leave a decently short list to the person coming after them, saying, hey, here's who you need to know. This is who's in your kitchen cabinet. And what you're trying to do is make sure that you are in that kitchen cabinet for disability issues for that staffer.
Lily, I'm going to jump in with two things. Anybody, in terms of your thank you and any communication you're having with them, if you, particularly if you met with a member, the member is and did a photo, because when you meet with a member, you generally have a photo. But even if you took a photo with the staffer, if you put, or whatever it is you put up on your social media about this meeting, tag the office.
Yep.
Tag the staffer, tag the member, tag the office, because they want to know. They they love that. That's why. And they will know that you did that. And it's another way of building that relationship. So if you took a picture, the member will tag it themselves, but you can put it on your social media and tag them. And that's really important.
Yes. These are some final notes and reminders that I think we've touched on all of them about the long-term relationship building aspect of this and making sure that you set yourself up to be a trusted partner, not just someone with an ask once a year for more money. The nature of high turnover in Hill offices. So if you haven't had contact with an office in the last year, your contact may be gone. And so it being a marathon and something you have to do routinely outside of the regular large amount of work that I know you all have. A lot of staff are young. There's a lot of jokes in DC about how the Hill is run by 23-year-olds. It's probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but maybe not too far off. Even though Hill staff may be young, do not count them out as being helpful to you. There are folks who get deep policy knowledge and get really in the weeds on things. And so be as helpful as you can to that staffer and make them feel good about the meeting with you and the time with you and valued. It's important. Emphasizing again, staff is as important as member. So if you get a member meeting, that's great. Members don't work on substantive parts of issues. So staff are really powerful people to meet with. And then again, those touch points outside of office visits, that's not just the twice a year visits you do. If you publish something cool, if there's a news article that you all are mentioned in, always great if you've built that relationship with a staffer to send them an email and say, hey, want to make sure you saw this. We got some great coverage in the Indianapolis Star and wanted to share this with your office. You may only get like a quick terse thank you, but they do appreciate they're busy and you may not actually get any answer. But sending emails like that, if your annual report comes out, maybe you publish something else, share those things with them periodically throughout the year. And you don't even need a meeting to do so. It's low lift touch points for you. And that is everything. We were more over time on that than I thought. We talked a lot. I'm going to exit out of the slides so that I can see the chat and we can have discussion or questions if there are questions.
Lily, the other thing I will add is to be sure to ask, always ask and offer to have somebody come visit, whatever it is to come visit. And that staff, you're not likely to get the member to come visit the first time, but to get a staff person, even a junior staff person to come visit, they're the ones who will carry back your message. And the more that they can actually see what you're doing, and that all depends on what you're doing and what you can invite them to see. But that can really go a long ways toward helping them conceptualize, because all of you, obviously, every UCED is, one UCED is one UCED. You are meeting community need. But if you can have them see that, that's a
And
plus.
if I could piggyback off of that, then Stephanie will go to you because I see your hand. I did not realize until working on the Hill that policy staff and Hill staff is easier if you're more on this side of the country. The farther you are, the less often it happens. But they do go in district, and they are, it is part of their job to go in district during recesses. especially a really long recess like the August recess we have right now. During an election year, October is a recess because of the time for members to go home and campaign. So staff are supposed to go and do visits, and take constituent meetings in district and do all of those things. So they will go home for a week or two at a time. If you are not as far state, then they likely do in district travel when they just have the 1 week long recess that happens about once a month. It's not on a regular cadence, so I can't tell you exactly what it is. But that is part of their job. So it's very, very feasible to get staff visits in district.
Yeah.
Stephanie.
This is going to be a two-part question, but I forgot my first part. So I'm going to go to the second part. Yes, Denise. Imagine that. I don't always have the most recent contact information for individuals, right? And I have tried calling to get that, and like people are like, no, what do you want it for? Like, I mean, they're keeping it quote unquote secret. Do you guys have lists of like all the health and who else should we be contacting besides the health staffer for senators and legislators, representatives?
Yeah, so we don't keep like an exhaustive list because it changes so often that the second I create a list, it's out of date. What we do have access to is we have Politico Pro, and that it's a tool. It's an expensive tool, so don't go get it.
No, we won't.
That you can search in a member's office and see all of the staff, and we can see what their portfolios are. So really what you should do, and is not an overstep, if you need contact information, email us and ask. I would ask that you don't wait until the last minute, but like, expect 48 hours or something like that, and we will get you staff information. Who I tend to go for, I look for, depends on what I'm doing. I would look for a health staffer, anyone whose portfolio says health. I look for whoever's portfolio is appropriations, especially right now. I want to talk to an appropriate staffer. And then I don't really do a legislative director because they're so high up that they're not the policy person. They kind of run the office, or a chief of staff is like that too. So those are probably the main two that I look for. You could CC an ed staffer. And what I also recommend doing is when you start the email and tell them, I'm not sure whose portfolio the USEDs fall into. Here's who we are. Please feel free to loop in anyone else from your office that should be connected for this, and add them. Please feel free. And then they will do that, and that's perfectly fine. But you are always welcome to email me. You can email Shoshana, and we will pull the relevant staff information for you.
Okay, thank you.
And Lily, there's a question in the chat.
Okay, how responsive are staffers if you reach out for a relationship building type meeting, not just talk about a specific bill or topic? Any tips or a sample email template on how to get them to be more likely interested? They seem so busy. I think responsive can be hit or miss. It really depends on how you time it, and timing it in a smart way, that you time it around. If you're going to send an email, maybe you send an email saying, I'd really love to connect with you during the next recess. And we can share how to find the congressional calendars. So you could say, there's a recess coming up from January 23rd to the blah, blah, blah. Would really love to connect with you over Zoom during recess if you have time. I think they're pretty receptive to that. And I've typically found that if they don't have time, I normally get hey, I'm swamped. Can you please follow up in March? And they tell me. And if you're doing just a relationship building meeting, it's not a big deal. And you say, yeah, no problem. I'll email you again in a few weeks. Hope you're well. and then you pop back up a few weeks later to see about that March meeting. And I normally have okay luck with that. That seems to work okay for me.
Two things for that. One, and Jennifer's right. She said she did it by going in with the DDAC partners. So
Yeah.
the three of you going in together, particularly right now, I think that's a good way to do it. Or the idea is going with somebody else or some other coalition that might help. And the other thing is, um, you don't necessarily, sometimes you have to do it over and over again. Your email may get lost in somebody's inbox, and you know what? You got to email again.
Yep.
Sometimes it just takes persistence. The first time they won't know who you are because they don't know what a USET is and they're busy and yada yada. But if you go back again and say, just wanted to get this back to the top of your email box, still would really like to do this, would love to, and maybe you highlight something different the next time. Would really like to talk to you, show you what we're doing on this issue, or whatever it may be. I think that's another way, but it can take, even with staff, it can take a couple of emails and you just have to be persistent about it. They are busy, but you are a constituent, and making
And
sure that you say that every time. You're a constituent, you want to
yeah,
meet about this. You're not somebody from a national organization reaching out.
yes. And you can also
Yeah.
if you've bumped your email once or twice and you're not hearing back, what you can also do that will not be interpreted as passive aggressive at all, you can follow up and reach out to a scheduler, and you can say, "Hey, I'm trying to get a meeting. I've reached out a couple of times to the policy staff. Could you get me connected and help me get a meeting with the right person?" And a scheduler could help with that too.
Yeah.
Which is, again, then if you, back to Stephanie's point, if you're like, wow, I'm really struggling to get in, who is the scheduler? Come to us, we can pull that information and
Yeah.
figure out who to get to.
Yeah. Bio, I
Um,
suggested again, a bio. Yes, the bio may help you also with what to lead with. Correct.
and I know we are over an hour. Any other questions? Yeah, looking them up on LinkedIn, highly recommend.
Yep. Good. We got a
Okay.
question, so I will emphasize again for anybody who came in late, Lily, that this is recorded and we will be sending out the
Yes.
recording and slides. So
Yes.
you can have access to these, and they are shareable with whomever, colleagues in in your USED, whoever you want to share that with.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for repeating that.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you all, and thank you for sticking on so long. This was longer than we thought it would be, but hope this was helpful and productive, and appreciate you being with us.